When you came to produce your podcast in 2020, you were roughly about 25 episodes in. And just now you're at 566 episodes.
I know, yeah.
And one thing I just want to pause and applaud you for, actually, is that your absolute consistency. You have released an episode every week of every month of every year since
August of 2019.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
I know everybody who is watching or listening to this right now wants to know that if they take anything away from this podcast, what is the key to you sustaining that many episodes, that many weeks, that many months, that many years?
This is the Growth Accelerator Podcast, where your host, Traci DeForge, is your guide to transforming your company's podcast into a dynamic lead generation and marketing powerhouse.
We have seen really successful monetization strategies,
giving you the blueprint to elevate your podcast from good to exceptional.
It really opens up this whole other opportunity for you.
And unlock its true potential to drive your business growth.
I really want to make sure your foundational pillars are in place.
Now your host, Traci DeForge.
Welcome to the Growth Accelerator Podcast, the podcast for business owners leveraging podcasting for growth in the areas of visibility, leads, and sales. I'm your host, Traci DeForge, and I have with me Jenn Trepeck, a health and wellness coach guru, and the host of my most favorite podcast name ever, Salad with a Side of Fries.
Well, thank you for having me. I will say it is my favorite podcast name too. I get compliments on it a lot, but it has also gotten to the point where if somebody says, I don't get it, I'm like, I just don't think we're going to be friends.
Well, I got it right away. And then we did actually end up becoming friends, which I super love about our relationship. But I think for the audience, what I really want to highlight, what is the biggest benefit that you have seen by leveraging your podcast to grow your health and wellness nutrition business?
Everything I do is about changing the state of healthcare, empowering people to reclaim their health. And the podcast is the maximum of that. It is reaching people in a way that is totally accessible, not behind a paywall, not behind any of these barriers. So it's really about helping people reclaim their health, not just delivering on my mission of the business, but even in terms of my business itself. I have actually completely rebranded everything to the podcast brand. So I started the podcast about 12 years after I started health coaching. And the success of the show, the success of that branding has really evolved every piece of my business.
So our journey with podcasting together started through the podcast audit. And the podcast audit, for our audience, just a quick highlight, is we work with a business owner who has a podcast and they're feeling a little stagnant. They haven't grown. So we do a deep dive into how the show is being discovered, the production values, the business development piece, are there calls to action, potential for monetization, sponsorship. So when you came to produce your podcast in 2020, you were roughly about 25 episodes in. And just now you're at 566 episodes.
I know, yeah.
And one thing I just want to pause and applaud you for, actually, is that your absolute consistency. You have released an episode every week of every month of every year since
August of 2019.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
I know everybody who is watching or listening to this right now wants to know that if they take anything away from this podcast, what is the key to you sustaining that many episodes, that many weeks, that many months, that many years?
I think part of it is I live and breathe this conversation. It is what I talk about with my clients. It's what my friends talk about. It's what my social media is. So there has never been a shortage of content. And everything is frankly always evergreen. So there are always people asking these questions, and that creates the momentum around the content. The other piece, and we've talked about workflow before, I am booked with guests almost a year out. And so it creates a situation where I
You
don't
have
have a choice
accountability.
but to, right.
You have
I
to
don't have a
show up.
choice but to keep going,
Right.
So
So
yeah.
when we were doing the audit together, so what were some of the things that you remember? And I realize we're going back in time a bit, but in terms of what were some of the things you were struggling with? And then what were some of the barriers that we broke through together through the audit? And then let's continue the journey from there.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't necessarily come to the audit with a struggle. I came to the audit of, I figured out my pattern, right? I figured out what this looks like for me, and I don't know what I don't know. And so it was really about saying, what does somebody else who's been in this space see when they look at my show? What are the pieces that I'm not noticing because I'm new or because it's just what I've been doing and what I started doing? I think one of the biggest things that came from the audit was my weekly bonus episode.
The nutrition nugget.
Yes.
I remember the conversation we had when we concepted the nutrition nugget, and the strategy behind that was to be able to have a signature sauce segment, which is basically a producer podcast. We're known for that. But in the case of the nutrition nugget, the strategy was initially to have your long form episodes have this signature piece of content inside of it that was focused on health and nutrition specifically. And then you would be able to extract that out and repurpose it. Because if I remember, now we're really going down memory lane, but if I remember, one of the biggest things that you wanted to do as a result of the audit was to increase your downloads. And so that was a really good download strategy because you could go to twice a week releases, basically.
Exactly. So in the beginning, the Nutrition Nugget segment was part of the full episode, and then we pulled it out and also published it separately. And then over the years, it ended up where we've now pulled it out. So I'll preview it at the end of the full episode, but it airs completely separately on its own, a separate day of the week. It was interesting even to see the almost double in downloads from people who were coming back a second time each week.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It was a very successful tool to increase those downloads, but then also to, as a result of the downloads, then you were able to increase the number of people who followed and subscribed to the show as well from that. And so I think that was probably our first win that we had from the audit. But I mean, again, that was our first stepping stone in the path of working together. Some of the things that I remember, well, definitely the trademark,
Yes.
I mean, we didn't work together on you getting the trademark, obviously, but really you mentioned that you rebranded your entire business around the focus of salad with a side of fries. And it is such a great name, as we mentioned. And having that trademark was something that I remember going, when are you going to get that trademark done? When are you going to get that? And you got it done, which was amazing. And the website URL, everything being tied into and having that consistency across all of the pieces of your branding, the website URL. And we actually even work together on making sure your website was reflective of the quality of your show and all of those things as well.
So we rebranded, everything, the trademark, and then I'm trying to think what came next in the sequence of things, but eventually launched merch.
Yes,
So,
the merchandise. Yes, so that was really fun because, let's back into, first of all, because you had a paid community.
Yes.
And so the paid community was something that one of the monetization streams that you have for your show is that you have ads and sponsors, which we'll definitely talk about. You have community, you have the merch, you've done live events. So your monetization model is very robust that we've worked together on.
Yeah, and frankly, all of that is separate from the fact that the podcast itself has become sort of top of the marketing funnel that leads people into working with me as their health coach.
Right, because the goal of the podcast, just to be clear, is to get new health and wellness clients that you coach, and that's where you're generating the primary revenue source of your brand. But then the podcast has enabled you to really have all these diversified revenue streams, like we were mentioning, the merch, the community, the working on the live events and things like ads and sponsorships. It's a really well-rounded monetization strategy, if I do say so myself.
Thank you. Yeah. So the membership launched January of 2020. So the show launched August of 2019. I started the membership January of 2020. And it was about helping people pay a little bit more to dip their toe in the water of what it's like to have that extra support. And it created, because otherwise you had this free top of the funnel. and then really not much to offer until you got to these higher ticket paid services. So the membership was then sort of that next tier that brought them into the ecosystem.
I think what you're talking about is important to highlight because there is a time and a place for monetization. One of the questions that we often get at Produce Your Podcast is, I've got 10 episodes, how do I monetize them? Right. And it's like, whoa, hold on, you can, but, and we've actually even had people monetize their show pre-launch, but it's really important to, I think, set realistic expectations because what you're saying is it's a great top of the funnel tool for you, but then you also have to be able to reach people where they are in the areas of where they know, like, and trust you. And health and nutrition is a very important referral-based business. It's also an important results-based business. And so how have you used the content of your podcast to really layer in that visibility piece, but also that trust and the credibility factor? Because that's, to me, seems to be a really huge revenue driver for you once you get that nailed.
So first of all, there's a lot of pieces to that. I think you mentioned before the consistency of now between full-length episodes and the bonus episodes, it's 566, give or take. That consistency is a big piece of somebody saying, I want to work with that person. Like if you keep showing up, they go, that's what I get. And I also believe that if you over-deliver and the pieces that are free, they start to go, wait a minute, what do I get if I actually pay something?
Yes. Love
so I think that's been a big piece is the content, the consistency of the show. Then in terms of highlighting what we do. So half of my episodes are interviews. Half of my episodes are what I call sort of my content, things I talk about with my clients. And joining me on those episodes, because I want it to still be a conversation. I think a conversation's way more compelling to listen to than just somebody talking for however long. So in the beginning, and even still, I have friends who join me on those.
Right.
And as that paid community, that membership grew, one of the things that I offered them is a quarterly live Q&A. So just us, not recorded. Sometimes I do it as a one-on-one because people share more and, a conversation that's just us. I started to invite them to join me for episodes. And then for the 100th, 200th, and 300th episodes, I have listeners, members, right? People, clients even, call in and leave voicemails. So we have used then their voices to highlight the podcast, things that they've learned from the show, changes that they've made in their life because of something that's happened from the show. So that's also been tremendous for showing people the value of continuing to show up and listen. And this year, in the last year, we've started doing a couple episodes I wouldn't call it a series, but a couple episodes called Real People, Real Results. And it's clients. So it's talking through what their experience was, what were their reservations before, what is health coaching, and really bringing that in so that people, again, start to see the difference between getting information, doing it entirely self-directed, and what it's like to really work with somebody in a personalized way.
That's so interesting that you say that because business owners often think that the only way that they should do a podcast is a Q&A, similar to what we're doing right now, and that somebody went to podcast school and they said, this is the way you do it, and that's the only way you do it. But one of the things that has been so great about working with you is really formulating that strategy of what works best for your audience. And I think that we always have to remember, and that's one of the things that I talk about so often, is what's in it for your audience. And when we were looking at different formats and the ways that we could communicate with your audience, so yes, you want to bring in those experts and have that Q&A because that is something that you want to do as being the thought leader yourself, but then also the short forms and being able to talk through your specific expertise and going vertical in that, and then making sure that your clients are highlighted. And they're not testimonials or infomercials. They're basically really good pieces of content where your clients are sharing real results that they've gotten. And so as a result of that, that's coming back to your credibility, to your expertise, and really reinforcing that to your audience. And it's just been amazing to watch this and create and craft with you these different aspects of formats and use them so effectively. And I think it's such an important takeaway to know that you don't have to, I always say that there's no right or wrong, it's a right or a left. And so much so that we actually reconstructed our packages this year to integrate long form and short form so that our business owners could really showcase their own expertise. Or their clients' results.
And you probably knew this. It didn't occur to me when we talked about adding what I call the bite-sized bonus episode, but it became another entry point. So new listeners who discovered the show didn't have to commit to so much time to get a taste of, no pun intended, like what this show is about. And so, I mean, you probably knew that, but it was a piece to me. But it was a new piece to me of recognizing some of the value of that shorter form and even the consistency of that shorter form, because now some people show up just for those, which is awesome too.
But I mean, I think what you're talking about is just real life practical applications to some of the things that we talk theoretically a lot in, like our pre-launch strategy, for example. So I'm explaining when our business owners, because they're very busy, they're very intellectual, they're very kind of in their own mind about their area of expertise, which is important. But they also, again, having to think about what's in it for the audience. And right now, everybody's audience is time starved. So if you think about your own habits of scrolling that feed, you're like 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay, I can give this person that I don't know yet, that I haven't listened to their content yet, I'm willing to give them 5 to 8 minutes, or I'm willing to give them 10 to 20 minutes. And then convert back to the long form, which is one of the reasons why we did redesign those packages. But I love hearing it like work in real life, real business, right? Real life, real results.
There you go.
I want to also talk through this branding piece, because again, this is one of the things we identify more frequently in the audits, but we also have identified it in pre-launch too. Should I name the show something different than the name of my business? Should I have the show on the website for my business, or should I have a separate website for my podcast? There's a lot of should-as and should-as, right? So not to pick on you, but I do remember that it was Jenn at bettermylife.com. It was Salad with a Side of Fries podcast. It was health and
I know.
It was
all the URLs, all the websites.
All the URLs, all the things. I even remember we working together to get you to Jenn at JennTrepeck.com for your email, because I was like, no one knows what Better Your Life Now is anymore.
I know. Well, but that was the piece of, I had a health coaching practice for 12 years. When I launched the show, I didn't know what it was going to become. It was literally me in my apartment with a microphone, and so it evolved organically and intentionally, but I didn't know. So even in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm going to launch this podcast. We'll see what happens. And I paid somebody on Fiverr to slap a website together so that the show had a site for people to go to, but it wasn't integrated into my health coaching practice website. Right. It was, so there were all these separate pieces that in the rebranding and in working together when we redid my website, it was putting everything under one umbrella.
And I think the key piece of that, though, is identifying that your podcast needs to have that consistency. It doesn't need to be named the same as your business, because that's not imperative. In fact, we're the Growth Accelerator Podcast. Produce Your Podcast is my business. One of the PYP signature strategies, if you will, is to make sure you own the URL of your podcast. So that was one of the first things is we, in fact, I even specifically remember that it's a salad with a side of fries.com for
which,
now.
For what it's worth, nobody owns salad with a side of fries.com, but GoDaddy wanted a small fortune. And I was like, nope, an A in front will do.
Right. And it did. and so, like for us, for example, it's growthacceleratorpodcast.com. And the reason behind that is because when someone is consuming your content, they're going to remember how they found you. They're going to remember. I literally remember our conversation about Better My Life Now is like live your best life now, be your best life now. It was very Oprah-esque. Oprah was becoming outdated at the time.
For what it's worth, in 2007 when I started, it was spot on. It just didn't live on.
It's fine. It was top of the line at the time. But salad with a side of fries, clearly more memorable. But again, from the strategy perspective, it's all about that's where your listeners or your viewers found you. That's what they're going to remember. So in your call to action, you want to make sure that you tell them where to go in a way that they'll remember, because especially with audio podcasts, people are maybe going for a walk or they're at the gym when they're listening to your podcast. Right. They're not going to be able to connect the dots, or you don't want to ask them to connect multiple dots. Just ask them to go point A, point B equals point C. I'm going to pivot. I've kind of known for pivoting the dialogue here, and we're going to talk about your true leap of faith with Producer Podcast. Clearly, you believed in me as a strategist. Clearly, you believed in the results of the audit. But I won't say the hardest, but I will say in my opinion, your biggest leap of faith was going from being a DIY podcaster, business owner that was DIYing their podcast, which was very time consuming, to hiring a full service podcast production agency. That was something that took a little longer than I thought it was going to take. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, well, part of it was, like so many of us when we start and we're not really sure what's going to come of this added venture, right? And I talk about it all the time as, sometimes we have more time than money. Sometimes we have more money than time. And when I launched the show, I had more time than money. During the pandemic, I had more time than money. And then as life came back after the pandemic, as the show grew, as other pieces of my business grew, it got to the point where what is the highest and best use of my time? And it wasn't in editing the show. It wasn't in
writing the
show notes. That one for me especially, because we hear it all the time. You create your content for the listener, but you write the episode notes for Google.
Thank you, Todd Cochran of Blueberry.
Right.
We quote him all the time.
Right, all the time. I am way too clever and a writer for Google. So the episode notes that I would write for the show were not delivering in the same way that the copywriter's episode notes would deliver.
Right.
And so that was another piece of like the next level of growth too that came out of outsourcing, different aspects. So it was an evolution to say, this is where my highest and best use of my energy is. Yeah. And that is in the content, in the strategy, in the planning, in the guest booking, in all of those conversations, rather than in the editing and the show notes and those kinds of things. And I think in my own workflow, one of the biggest things that changed was the fact that I could now mentally move on to the next episode. So I now, we're a few years into this. So
you could focus on the content you wanted to create versus the workflow and the heavy lifting of the editing and the show notes and the marketing deliverables and all of those things. I mean, I'm just, we tell people that's the case. But again, it's really nice to hear somebody actually in their real life experience share what a difference it made to them.
Yeah. And I was already working with people in social media and some of these other pieces. But so they were so grateful that I was then even planning further out in terms of the content and what was happening and, able to plan in that way because I wasn't so in the weeds on everything post-production.
That's an interesting benefit we don't really hear very often, is that it actually made the workflow for your team more seamless as well. So you weren't the bottleneck anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So you just completed our sponsorship circle, which is our private coaching program for business owners who want to get sponsors for their shows. Tell me your biggest takeaways from the program.
The biggest piece about sponsorship is that it puts you in the driver's seat of who you're partnering with. Because I am incredibly picky and diligent about the brands that I'm willing to align with and put my name on. And so with the sponsorship approach, number one, it's not tied to downloads. So it creates a lot more freedom and flexibility, a lot greater leverage of the community that we've built. Because I really think, as you say all the time, right, downloads doesn't necessarily give the value to what you've built in an audience all the time. It's driving that growth separate from this one number and allows me to reach out to the brands that I already know are a hell yes for me. And so I'm super excited. There's a couple that are in the works, so we'll see what happens.
And your beautiful presentation deck and your packages.
Yes,
I mean that we worked together on that, and really seeing that presentation deck come to life with the sponsorship language all integrated into it. I mean, I'm taking your win, but I thought it was a win because it looks
it's all because of what we learned with in the sponsorship circle.
Yeah. Okay, so monetization, quick hit list, because and probably of all of our clients, you have one of the most diverse revenue streams for monetization. Let's hit them really quickly. How do you monetize your show?
All right. So in chronological order, I did the membership, ads for brands that I have affiliate relationships with already, then merch, live events, soon to be a book. Oh, sponsorships. So, we're just tackling it all as we go.
You're just hitting all of the goals of the dream monetization podcast strategy. I love that.
Doing what we can,
and more to come. Speaking of more to come, if you were to identify a gap of an area of growth, either between your podcast and your business or your business and your podcast, what would that gap be, and how can I help you with it?
Free coaching. So I think with the launch of the book, I'm actually not naming this book the name of the show. And so it is sort of going to be another piece of this brand, kind of with a different name. And so I guess the question is around bringing the book into the ecosystem of everything else, marketing the book and making sure that while the book brings new audience because they're readers, maybe not necessarily listeners, there is certainly that crossover. So how do I launch? How do I grow? How do I leverage and market the book?
Okay. So I think the audience first would want to know, since we've talked so much about branding and consistency, and also was the very first question that I asked you when you told me that, which is, why aren't you naming the book Salad with a Side of Fries? Because that's the second book. So the first book.
Right. So it's interesting because this could be also a whole separate podcast onto itself, but the whole book strategy, I felt like initially when I started thinking about it years ago, I felt like everything I knew had to be in this one book. And so in working on it, one of the pieces was that we need to think of this as a book portfolio, not as the one book. And so because it's not the one book, it's not the Salad with a Side of Fries Secret to Health and Wellness, that's the next one.
How do you bring your audience in and help grow your show? I think in 5 seconds or less, which I can't do, I will say the most important piece of this is as you're writing the book and as the book is being developed, you want to bring your listeners and your audience into the process. So tell them about the book in your episodes. Ask them to send in questions. They're very familiar with already calling in for your 100th, 200th, 300th episode. So they're going to be willing and excited to be a part of your creative process. To bring them in so that you're seeding the excitement for the book pre-launch. And then once the book launches, they're already going to be so excited about what's coming and being a part of it. And then you can utilize the things that they provided for you in your marketing for the book. You've already done a live event, so I would look at your downloads and I would figure out what cities are your top 3 to 5 cities that you have the most downloads from and target those cities for book launch events and book signing events. And you can probably get a sponsor for that book tour. Just saying. Jenn, you have been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your amazing podcasting journey with us. How can people get in touch with you?
Yes, well, all social media, I am at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck, and my website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. Wherever you're listening, Salad with a Side of Fries podcast.
Yes, that name is unforgettable. Don't worry. But in case you can't write it down, it will be in the show notes, and links to all the resources and how to get in touch with you will all be there. And for more insights, tips, and resources, go to growthacceleratorpodcast.com, and we'll see you there.
Congratulations! You're on your way to turning your business or company's podcast into a thriving lead generation and marketing force. Connect with us and schedule a meeting with our team at produceyourpodcast.com. Launch or grow your podcast and start generating more visibility, leads, and sales for your business today.
Let's get started.